Welcome to the Daily Injection Program. This is March 26th, show number 8. On September 14th, 2008, I headed down to the Green River in Colorado for a 4-day rafting trip with no cell reception or anything. Me, my then girlfriend, now my wife, and my brother, 2 years younger, we did this 4-day trip. Epic views, just an amazing experience. Little did I know, when I come out of it, my portfolio or the entire planet had a huge correction those in that time span, and then 1 month later, Lehman moment. But I want to tell you that in those 4 days, when I had no reception, then I came out and all this mania and hysteria happened in the markets. It really made me realize that everything that I've read in hundreds of books since I was 16, at that point I was 24, all of these books that I've read about market crashes, how they make these hysteria heightened and accelerated, and how stuff happens in bear markets that people go nuts over their portfolio. I saw it in real time. How can I be there for 4 days and when I come out, the world is so drastically different? What has happened, right? So that was a big lesson for me in handling hysteria and market crashes, market corrections ever since. But it's an age-old lesson. A very unique story, a true story about a husband and wife, both choosing to handle their portfolio differently with the same wealth manager in the 60s. And 30 years later, they look at their results. The husband, hands-on, calls his wealth manager every 2-3 weeks. What's going on with my portfolio? Did you hear about this event? Did you hear about that event? The oil shock, everything that happened between the 60s and the 90s with the Vietnam War, the Nixon shock, the oil shock, inflationary in the 70s. The wife, very different, almost forgot about her portfolio altogether. And they look at their portfolio 30 years later. The wife so outperformed the husband. And that's because she just didn't touch it. She allowed her blue chip companies to compound. And when I say compound, I mean that every time they dished out a dividend, which is the shareholders' profits, after the CEO has realized that he has all the cash he needs to grow the business, make mergers and acquisitions, make buyback programs, and anything else he wants to do, then here's your dividend. And companies that are great, they're able to increase their dividend year over year for decades. And I wrote a lot about that at wealthresearchgroup.com. On the top menu, you'll see Dividend Mania. And that's where I get into that in depth, because that's where the lion's share of my wealth is resided, with dividend aristocrats. Anyways, she so outperformed it. And then obviously that triggered a lot of interest, because the wealth manager actually gave it to his assistant, gave her portfolio to his assistant, because she said, don't touch, just listen to the few stocks that I want to buy every year, and that's it. Don't touch my portfolio at all. I love these companies. I want to own them forever. And so an assistant was handling her, while the chief guy was handling this husband's portfolio, and it drastically underperformed. So they took the study to Wall Street, and it became a very famous study. And the idea behind it is that if you own the best companies and you allow them to compound and you reinvest the dividends, you will have a far better result. Usually, if you're not one of those top 20 people in the world that you and I will never get to invest our monies with, unless we find the next one, that are able to perform better than the market, and we catch them early before they shut down their portfolios and their hedge funds, etc., to regular people. So that is the biggest lesson, and I want you to think about that, and I want you to think about that in terms of your age. If you're younger, that is a really good strategy, in my opinion. If you're older, you need to always keep in mind, hey, how many years has the market hadn't had a correction or a pullback or a bear market? Because if a long time has passed, you need to start thinking, hey, I've made a great gain here. In 5 years, I'm retiring. No reason for me to keep everything here, because I know how hysteria is. When you take something out, put it in real estate, less fluctuating, much more income oriented. So age plays a big difference. But between the rafting and this study and the hundreds of books that I've read over the years, I'm telling you, just understand that the market is basically a mirror of how our economy always grows, but always needs to sift out some stuff. So over 100 years or 60 years or 40 years or 30 years of your life, when you invest or when you inherit an investment and keep on going on, or when you will give your funds to your children, blue chip companies and companies that are able to retain a lot of their competitive advantage and then reward shareholders, the owners of the company, by increased dividends every single year. You cannot beat that. Um, that's a fact. So I want to talk to you about that and keep that in mind and really look into that. Secondly, let's talk about the market as a guide, right? First 2 months of this coronavirus, nothing, all-time highs. Then the fastest and most violent top to bottom bear market in history. And in the last 3 days, amazing. Goes up, goes up, goes up because of QE infinity and because of these bailout relief packages. Do not use the market as your guide. Use your mind as your guide. Use data, research, history as your guide. The market is not there to tell you what to do. The market is there to tell you what other people are thinking so that you can have a grasp as to the sentiment over the short term, because you want to be greedy when others are fearful. That's really what it comes down to if you want to really grab these opportunities where the markets are just tanking. And it doesn't matter if you bought after the market corrected by 15 and then you saw another 15 going down. The market is not there to tell you you made a mistake. The market is there to tell you I'm panicking. And what you need to decipher is whether or not you can understand if somebody knows more than you do. If you think that that's the case, do not dabble in specific names and more concentrate about around the index itself or one of the indices as a whole. If you know a lot about a single company, then make sure that you act on your instincts. So now I want to talk to you about the big picture. You can only be one of two camps, and I said this in one previous episode, but I really want to reiterate this. You are either in the camp that says this is a hyper deflation moment. The Fed, the ECB, the global central banks, plus Washington, they cannot stop the rush to the dollar. We're going to have a hyperdeflation. Everything will go down in price. Everything. Or you're in the camp that says this is a reflation. From here on, from 2 days ago, this is a reflation. They've done all that they can. They're going to reflate this economy, basically. Stocks are going to go higher. I'm not saying they're going to go back to all-time highs soon, because there are now restrictions on them, and there are many parts of the economy that are still suffering, that will suffer for another year or two. But I am saying that we've avoided a hyper-deflationary crash and that we're back to normal. You're one of those two camps. If you're in this camp, the deflationary crash, you should have a lot of cash. And if you're in the reflation camp, you should think about commodities, in my opinion, and wait on real estate, because real estate is going to take time to process through. And if you're looking for income in real estate, you know that tenants are very problematic right now. But with regards to stocks that have fallen by 30 to 50% and have nothing to do with the coronavirus, think which companies you like to own and start making moves. So really, which camp are you? And think about that. Lastly, with this show, I want to talk to you about the Easter date. I talked about this yesterday. The Easter arbitrary date that Trump has put is just a way for the entire country to zoom in on a certain date. Doesn't mean it will happen, but it means that we will focus everything towards that date. I think what's really important to understand is that as a president, you have to weigh so many things, and one of them being, can the economy function with just New York City on a bigger um, uh, curfew or bigger quarantine, and some areas of California, etc. Do we need to have this blanketed restriction, or can we start focusing on areas? Because we've definitely flattened the 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 hysteria, and that's a big part of it. Because now people are ready to go back to society a little bit, and that's an important part of the confidence. Secondly, we've alleviated much of the economic problem. Um, Papering it over with debt, that's I'm not saying that's the fix, but that's the best fix that we have currently, unless we want to change the entire system, and that's not for you and I to decide. And then thirdly, um, uh, do we have enough equipment, beds, and staff to handle epicenters? And I think that by Easter, we will get the answer for that. The markets are already pricing in that they will, that this is fine, and that the worst is behind us in terms of the hysteria, not the death. The death cases will probably continue. This is not a seasonal flu. It is about 10 times harsher than a seasonal flu. We will see a lot of deaths, but the bottom line is, do we need to all be under quarantine, and is it even feasible and realistic to assume that we will? Um, India's quarantine right now, the 1.3 billion people in quarantine, is a big case study. So we will see what they do. But I actually like the fact that the president did a 180 and said, "Look, I have Fauci in one ear, I have CEOs in the other ear. I have to mitigate. I have to make a decision, a leadership decision, and we shall see. We shall see if it's too early or not, but definitely a brave decision." Um, and then just to wrap up the show, to end the show, if you look at the way that this coronavirus has spread across the globe and how we've handled it as a global economy and just as a species and the human race with all of our communications, man, I am very proud of just everyone in general. This is amazing. We've been able to take something that was unknown and gather so much data on it in 2, 3, 4 weeks, and we're going to be off to the races again. There's literally not a lot that can stop the human race apart from us. If we are divided, if we are not effective, if we are not efficient, then we will end up killing each other with all this technology and weaponry that we have. But if we can come together as a race, the future is so bright, so bright. I'm so happy for my own future. I have a 3.5 year old, and I'm very excited for what she will see in her lifetime. So, be optimistic because we have a phenomenal planet, and we've really handled this beautifully. Until next time.